Hello, Betsy family, and welcome to another Ghost Light series interview. I'm very excited today to welcome as our guest playwright J.T. Rogers. As most of you know, we were scheduled to start rehearsals for Oslo just before the crisis began in earnest, and we were forced to shut down. So we never got to delve into his wonderful play. But J.T. is the playwright of Oslo, and we're very excited to have him with us to chat today. How you doing?
I am all right, thank you. How are you doing?
Excellent. Well, excellent may be overstating it a little bit. I'm hanging in there like everyone else. So first of all, how are you, and where are you riding out the?
I am currently, as it may not surprise people watching, in a bedroom. I'm in my bedroom in my house in Hastings-on-Hudson, which is a little village on the Hudson River, just north of the city of New York City. And I'm here in quarantine, like the rest of us, locked down with my son and my little sister. And my wife is up in Cape Cod taking care of her mom, who got ill from the coronavirus, but has recovered.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
I actually am familiar with Hastings-on-Hudson. It's a beautiful place up there.
It is today, the week has been this sort of, you have the French doors open and you're in the garden doing your work and you think, man, it's like you had to be locked down. This is a nice place to be locked down.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. We in Colorado think that all the time as well. Well, for starters, as I mentioned, you're the playwright of Oslo, which we were very excited to produce, and I was very excited to direct, and we were literally 3 days out from the start of rehearsal, and we had to bring everything crashing to a halt.
Yeah.
So I'm disappointed that we weren't able to do that, but hopeful we will in the future. So let's start by talking a little bit about Oslo. You, in your foreword to the play, tell some sort of great stories about the genesis of the project and how it came to be for you. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, yes. Usually, as I'm sure anyone out there who's a playwright who's watching I expect would agree that in a director indirect way, one play always leads to another, and this was rather a direct experience. I had written a play called Blood and Gifts that had been done at my theater home in London, which is the National, and then it was being done at Lincoln Center, a new production, and the director of the production in New York, Bartlett Shear, who's the resident director there, and was justly celebrated as one of our great directors. It was our first time working together, and we discovered as many similarities, and simpatico-ness between us as artists, as we both like to bring in people to talk to actors to sort of create a sort of a textured web of knowledge and essence for the cast. So our performances are grounded in that. So I brought in a number of journalists this play, Blood and Gifts, took place, it is a play about spies in Afghanistan and Pakistan in the 80s. Sort of the secret war behind the Soviet-Afghan War. And long story short, I brought in a bunch of spies and journalists who'd been on the ground during the fighting. And Bart brought in a man he'd met and become very friendly with, who was the father of his daughter's best friend, two girls' best friends in school, and the parents meet that way, as all of us who have children experience. And his name was Taya Rod Larson, who was the special representative for Lebanon, the Middle East, for the head of the UN at the time. And he came in and dazzled everyone with his erudition and mind-blowing stories about getting drunk with dictators of the Middle East and getting them to change their policies. And he was a real raconteur and fascinating. And he loved the play. I was very flattered. And then he saw the production and loved it even more. And Bart set up a meeting between Ty and myself. And Bart was smart enough not to tell me everything, because playwrights don't like to be told what they're going to write about. So he was wise. But Taya came in and we started talking, and a couple martinis in, hit my favorite watering hole on the Upper West Side. He revealed this story to me that was not new at all to the world if you look online, but radically new to me, of this secret back channel in the early 90s between the two Norwegian academics had set up between the Israeli government and the PLO. And they met in a royal sort of guest house in the middle of the woods and drank Johnny Walker Black and plotted a way to find peace, talk about their families. And Taya was the man who did this with his wife, Mona Yule. who is now currently the UN, the new U.S. ambassador to, the Norwegian ambassador to the U.S. And Taya runs a peace institute and it travels around the world. So they're both sort of now luminary figures in world politics, but at the time, just, ambitious, do-gooding pups. And I sort of, this blew my mind, thinking that I was an expert in this region and being a politics junkie. And so I started digging and going to Norway and interviewed people and discovered this incredible story that was out in the open, yet nobody, and certainly this country, knows about it at all. And so I created this meticulously researched, scrupulously accurate fiction where everything in the play actually happened, including the most bizarre and crazy things. But every line of dialogue is mine. And this sort of vast, 3-act monstrosity of a play that the wonderful thing was I knew that Andre Bishop at Lincoln Center was going to do it. In fact, he took me aside after I've been researching it for over a year. He said, "Are you going to really do this play?" And I said, "Yes, I'm really going to do it." He said, "Are you going to have it done in a year?" I said, "I promise." He said, "Good, because I'm going to program it now. Please don't not make the deadline."
That's a
So
good motivator right there.
it was really inspiring and terrifying. And so I workshopped it with Bart. And then we did it. We did it in the Mitzi Newhouse, and then it moved to Broadway, and then we did it at the National Theatre in London, and then it moved to the West End. And there you go. It all sounds so tidy when you say it like that, but yeah.
It does. It's so neat and
There you
clean.
go.
I was sure you'd have your Tony sitting over your shoulder so that we could see it during the conversation.
It's funny. My sisters here said, "Where's your Tony?" And I was looking around the house. I was like, "Oh, right. I packed it up when I went to Japan. I just had to come back. I was in Japan for a few months before coming home for quarantine, shooting a TV project I created." And I said, "Oh, yeah, I packed it away. I guess I should take it out." But, it's like everything. It was an incredible honor. But ultimately, 2 months later, it's, what are you doing now? What are you working on?
It's just another thing to dust, right? I mean,
yeah. I mean, to its credit, it's a beautiful physical award. It's really quite handsome, and I'm honored. But yeah, on to the next thing.
So when you dove into this project, obviously the Middle East and the peace process is a politically fraught and culturally fraught issue, and has been for so long now. Did you have reservations, or were there hurdles that you personally had to overcome to go, how can I wade into this story? How can I tell this story? Did you get blowback from people, or?
Yeah, I'm pausing. I'm trying to condense a sort of a wild ride into something that's hopefully interesting and informative, and an honest answer to your question. The truth is, I had wanted to write, quote unquote, about the Middle East. I often have ideas of places or large events that I want to set a play against. That's just because that's the itch I like to scratch as a writer. But I just didn't know how to do it. I didn't know how to do it without what you're sort of, to be blunt, without coming across but being pilloried as being pro this or anti that, or just that, really.
Appropriating culturally, or any number of things.
We can talk about that later, but this is really more about living in a city where you can't say the word Israel-Palestine without someone being enraged. Now, that someone is often from a very small minority of the population, but gets a megaphone, which is, how political discourse runs in our country across the board now, unfortunately. And there's a lot of very valid reasons for intense passions, put it mildly, on both sides. Anyway, so yeah, that's on the back burner. And then when this was dropped into my lap, most importantly, I ended up writing plays that immediately my spidey sense goes up when I hear something, read a fragment of dialogue, in this case, an entire real event, life story. And you go, oh my gosh, and you sort of get it all at once. You go, that's the beginning, that's the end. Okay, now I have to figure it all out. And also I'll put the caveat up front, is that I'm going to talk about, as I'm sure we'll talk a number of things about this play or other work of mine, but the thing I want to be clear about is, when you are writing a play, you're following your nose a lot of the times. And one of the things you learn over time is just to trust your nose, even when you don't know where you're going. So now things make sense, and often they did at the time, but just as often I had no idea what I was doing. And only later did I go, oh, that's why I did X or Y. So it took a while to realize the following, which was, Oh, the reason why this clicked for me, and this could be quote unquote my Middle East play, is the point of entry is the Norwegians. Now, if you're an American sitting down to watch a play with a very passionate idea about Israel-Palestine, and the first people on stage are Norwegians talking about it, and then we go from there, my thinking or hope is that you'll be like me, which is go, huh? And that you'll uncross your arms and lean in and be interested as opposed to judging before we begin. So that was really a gift. And anytime you can come at a story from an angle which upends expectations of yourself as the person making it, but certainly of the audience, it's great. So that was my way in. And then in terms of blowback, yes, we were so concerned about blowback. There's a scene in the play, just in case, you know, the gods work it out and you guys are able to do it, I won't go into too much detail for your audience. It's a nice surprise. But you know the scene I'm talking about where they impersonate people.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a scene where two people become very animated and sort of have animosity towards each other, get drunk, and they impersonate major political figures in the Middle East. And they say the things that that person drunk, they think would say to their arch enemy. And it's very, very intense. And it's sort of the sort of theatrical coup de grace of the play, I hope. But I have been talking about, I had a lot of concerns in the theater, and Bart and the cast like, no, we'll be fine, we'll be fine. The moment we ran that scene on its feet, you couldn't hear a pin drop, and Barton said, okay, we have to go upstairs and talk to Andre because this shit has just got really serious. And I said, I told you we were gonna have problems. So we literally ran upstairs to Dad, you know, it's a literally, okay, so we're really nervous. And to his credit, he's like, no, it's gonna be fine, it's gonna be fine. However, some of the cast rightfully were anxious. So, you know, we had security guard planted in the theater every night. We had a code word for the actors. If they were unsafe, they could walk up stage and say a phrase that would then immediately shut the show down. We had an active shooter policy meeting where we were trained what to do if someone opened fire.
Wow.
And we braced ourselves. Again, I don't want to paint it like we were assuming this would happen, or we in any way wanted it to happen, and it wasn't the intention of the play, but the idea that just putting the Palestinian Liberation Organization on stage in New York City, airing their grievances, that alone would send someone through the roof. But instead, we went to Broadway. So it was, which was never in my wildest dreams what I expected this particular play to do. So the long answer to that is yes, and then how nice that it wasn't a problem.
That's great. That's great. And we've done a fair amount of different kinds of historical drama at our company over the years that our audiences have seen. And one of the things I always talk about in the rehearsal room, et cetera, is one of the tricks of historical drama is that the plot is not the central vehicle. If we know the history, we know what happened. We know what the outcome was. We know that they came together and they signed the Oslo Peace Accords, and we know that they ultimately didn't hold, etc. But the actual arrival at fact to fact and the final conclusion is not in the way we're traditionally used to experiencing theater, kind of the main driver. So when you're writing a historical piece or historical docufiction or however you want to categorize it, how do you then, what do you hang your hat on as far as where's the drama going to come from? Where's the
well, one, I would say it's definitely a fiction to play. There's no you know, the docu element is the research by me, but then that's all thrown in a blender. So there's no like, it's not in any way, nothing, well, that's not true. I just did a play. We did a thing for the New York Times on Broadway for the 50th anniversary of the Moon Lawn, and I did an actual verbatim play, interviewing all the actual people that were involved, and we did that last summer. But so that's but this is
different animal. Yeah.
Read your books, you interview people, and then you make stuff up. But I don't think it's no different than writing a play that you're whole cloth out of your imagination. You just have to find a way to tell an interesting story. I think, you know, in the reality of the world we live in, for better and worse, I mean, think about yourself, or think about, I asked this to your audience, how many times do you go to a new play, and you already know the story? it's very difficult to not to in the sea of endless information that we live in, or did before the current moment. We'll see how this plays out or doesn't differently when we're on the other side of this. I've learned over time that sort of trying to hide the ball on what happens is rarely as interesting for an audience or myself as a writer, is just finding a way to build a story where the momentum and the events of surprise and drama pull you along, you know. I would love to watch Hamlet with someone. I actually went to an opening night of Hamlet in the park about 10 years ago, and I sat with a friend who was an actor, whose wife was an actor, and she had never seen Hamlet or read it. And so she was experiencing it. I was watching her experience as if it was didn't know the story, which was a kind of magical experience. But we don't really get that. So I think in a strange way, well, I'm just thinking back, it didn't really ever cross my mind that it would be a problem, because the story, it was more a problem of, oh my gosh, this is such a fascinating, the actual events are so fascinating, and all the things that are popping in imagination that I'm inventing are so great, one hopes. There's far too much. It was more a struggle of how do I condense it as opposed to how do I hide the ball.
It is a sweeping story. It's a lot to get into, even 3 hours.
Yeah. We were 3 hours and 40 minutes at first preview. I got 40 minutes out of in 3 weeks. And the crazy thing is, when we started at 3:40, there was no fat. I cut another 30 minutes out of the rehearsal process. So we started at 4, got to 3:40, and then we're down to a svelte lean 3 hours. I don't even, it's madness.
Hey, if it's compelling and it holds people attention, then I don't think they mind sitting still for that long. So that's the key. I think it's proven itself to be that.
Yeah,
so I'm sorry, I had a notification. So the thing about the play that grabbed my attention and that really struck me and that made me want to produce it and direct it is really this idea that's encapsulated at the end of the play, and again, I won't get into spoilers too much, of progress, and that by coming together and recognizing each other's humanity, that we can make progress on problems that seem intractable. And that resonated so strongly with me because I feel like it's a perfect description for what we're living in right now in our country.
Yeah.
What can you speak to that a little bit in terms of how it's not a political play in the sense that you're being dogmatic about one side.
No, it's not an ideological play, but it's a deeply political play in that it's people who are not political in the way that we use it as a disparagement in the arts in this country, but political in that the characters are what they believe in, will fight to the death for, and it's more important than their own lives, which is sort of Shakespearean in scope, which is what I find exciting about if writing about events like that are of that muscularity and heft. And I think that, yes, the play, again, you figure, I was asked in rehearsal, so do you think one of the actors who was a marvelous cast, and I give books to everyone, so everyone had a PhD in this by the time we opened, and one of the actors took me aside and said, do you think it was a good idea? Because it's controversial. There are people that say you shouldn't have done this, they shouldn't have had this back channel, and people think it's incredible, and what do you think? And I paused for a long moment and I said, Chris, I actually never asked myself that question until right now, because I'm a playwright and I'm not really interested in my personal ideological belief about things. I'm interested in other people. And so they had to think about it and go, yes, I think the journey of writing this play has taught me that I think it was a good idea. And then in the end, that's clearly what the play is saying. But the play got there before I got there, because the ideas of the play were the characters' ideas. My hope is to absent myself from whatever I'm writing. And yeah, the play is about, on a cellular level, something I think is quite true, and what the theater does better than anything, which is take a bunch of strangers, even enemies, and put them in a room, and they have the courage to humanize each other. you have people, but the two sides, we'll say, the Israeli characters and the Palestinian characters in this play, like in real life, took this enormous risk. And what they did was, by sitting with and seeing the other side as human, that they were actually changed permanently. And that these characters, in the coda they speak about it, and that, you know, the coda is the only sort of docudrama aspect of the play. It's all, again, written by me, but all those events that they talk about are all true, including the fact that I mean, I had multiple people from this play come to a night. We did it for the entire UN. We did a performance for 1,100 members of the UN. And the people who were in the play were there talking to each other, hadn't seen each other in 15, 20 years. And it was as if they were talking to their best friend, you know, in the corner, like that kids. It was just so moving. So there is that element, you know, of what the theater can do, the sort of the inability, you know, that only by seeing the person you are adversary with in personal terms can you go forward. And that is true in a rehearsal process, if you're having a problem, as on the world stage with blood and mayhem, you know, and that I believe to be true. And it does speak to our current moment. Not that that was in any way my intention. You know, you write the play, the worst thing to do in writing a play is to try to have a personal comment, you know, about, and thus here the author is going to tell you the theme of the play, and then, you know, that's when you want to shoot yourself. But yeah, it is, it's distressingly relevant now more than even when I was first sitting down to write it.
But I think, and the thing that attracted me to the play and it was the spur that made me want to bring it to our audience, is it's also, however bleak or however overwhelming the odds or the likelihood may seem, it's also hopeful. It also provides a glimpse of hope of, you can make progress, you can take steps forward, and that maybe.
And it's funny.
Well, tragedy is often funny, unfortunately.
I don't want to go to the theater anymore if it's not got humor and hope and wit and magic in it. So that's the aspiration, at least.
Well, speaking of going to the theater some more, obviously, I don't know that any of us will be going to the theater anytime real soon, but we're all looking forward to what the theater is in the future. So I'm curious what your views of, how is this going to change your work as a writer? How is it going to change the way you approach the day-to-day act of sitting down to put pen to paper or hit the keys, or just kind of where are you right now?
Yeah, I would say I am both. I have work to do. I'm fortunate that I have obligation. I've writerly obligations right now. So I'm, in a strange way, here adrift like everyone else, but also working like a dervish, which is allowing some of that personally, on a personal level, some of that existential crisis to get pushed off a bit. I am doing a TV show I created and wrote, set in Tokyo, and shot all in Tokyo, half in Japanese, half in English right now. And we were just stopped in the middle of filming the first episode. So I'm home now just writing to get everything finished for, you know. But even that, you can see there's a finite end to that. And then where do we go from there? So I think the larger answer is, I don't have any idea. And anyone that's saying they have an idea, I think they're just fooling themselves. Perhaps from a loving place, perhaps from a foolish place. But I think that I was having a conversation with my son about, I guess, a month ago into this. And he was saying to me, you know, Dad, this must be what it was like when 9/11 happened, where everything was different after that. And I thought about it, and I said, I think I would use a different analogy. I think I would use that this is like when the iPhone was introduced. He said, what do you mean? And I said, well, 10 years after, we're 10 or 11 years maybe after, since the iPhone right now. And 10 years ago, if you could have, it was inconceivable how much the world would be changed, and even people would start to be physiologically changed by this blessed and cursed device. So I think we're at the beginning of that. And so I think it's not only too soon to tell because we're all in the middle of the great pause, but also when we come out of it, there's, you know, frankly, a lot of it will depend on how brutal and how long this goes on. But having said that, I worry for the theaters of the country, but I don't worry for the theater, capital T. I mean, the theater survived the Black Plague, which we thankfully are nowhere near at this point. The theater survived, was it 20 or 22 years of being shut down, and certainly English-speaking theater, which was England, for all intents and purposes 400 years ago, was shut down for, I'm going to be probably off by a year or two, but 20 or 22 years to the Restoration, and it came roaring back. Now, I would like to not have to personally go through 22 years of that making or seeing theater with every fiber of my being, but I don't know. I think there's something about, I mean, it's difficult. It is for me at least, but there's something about trying to just sit here and go, I really don't know. And anything that we're making or saying is still has one foot in one reality and one foot in the other. And, you know, maybe there'll be the magical cure, and in 2 years or a year and a half, we'll be like, wow, did that really happen? You know, sort of like the Spanish flu. But I just don't know. In terms of, I'm sorry, I'm rambling, but
That's okay.
in terms of, I do think, you know, this sort of podcastian type theater and sort of things like that are gonna happen. I think we're all very malleable and wily and fluid theater people. We're like cockroaches in the best way. So it's going to be interesting to see what comes out of that. I think I would recommend, if those are watching, there's the Public Theater just put my friend Richard Nelson's play, What Should We Talk About, which is a Zoom play about the Apple family's characters he's made. It plays about for 10 years. You don't have to have seen any of the Apple plays to appreciate it, because my sister had not seen any of them, unlike myself. And it's kind of wonderful. It is wonderful. It's a Zoom piece of theater for the Zoom moment in the Zoom, and it's beautiful. But at the same time, you sort of go, oh, well, that's been done. I mean, really, like, Rich, 2 points for Richard. Well done. You extraordinary talent, you. But that's done. So I don't know. I mean, it's tough. I think that in a weird way, the lack of theater, like I now have a foot in the film and TV world for the last couple of years, but in the film and TV world, I think there's a grave, appropriate concern that there's a world on the other side of this where movie theaters will be gone, which is very troubling. For those of us who still grew up going and still like to go to a movie theater. But I think paradoxically in our profession is the opposite. I think this is all just making it that much clearer that live jazz music, live theater, live cabaret, live comedy, I mean, Zoom comedy, come on. It's like we need it. We need it on a profound level. So I'm weirdly hopeful about the long-term health of what we do. And maybe they'll, but I'm trying not to prognosticate, because I just think it's, certainly for me at least, I'll just prove myself foolish. That was a long answer, but I hope
that's great. No, I think that's a great winding encapsulation of what we're all going through, and it's an incredibly. I think one of the fascinating things about this moment is it's just this never-ending series of juxtapositions of we don't feel safe and we don't want to be around people, but at the same time we desperately want to be around people, and things have to slow down and we have to be patient, and our modern attention spans with our cursed iPhones that you described don't allow us to be patient and to be analytical and take our
there's
time.
Something, I was talking to a dear friend of mine yesterday who's in the arts, not in the theater, but a sister art form. And we were agreeing that, I'm pausing because it's going to sound callous what I'm saying, and I don't mean it. I, like all of us, want this to be over as soon as possible. And yet, in an alternate universe or in a hopeful world where people weren't starving because of this, there's some part of me that wants this to go on for quite some time so that it breaks us of cycles of things that I intellectually have felt are wrong, but now living without them has made me go, what the hell was I spending my time doing? Fill in the blank. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. So like everything, someone said, "Oh, do you want to write a play about this?" I said, "Oh my God, no."
Please
I mean,
don't.
20 years from now, maybe, I mean, listen to me, probably, it's so complicated that how could you write anything that would be able to be more interesting than the day to day of us living
Living
this
through
right
it. Yeah.
now? Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you so much for spending some time with us. I really appreciate it, and I'm glad that you and your family are safe and sound. And I'm very hopeful that we'll be able to get Oslo to the stage sometime in the future when all this.
Well, I hope so too. And thank you guys for attempting. Thank you so much for attempting to do the play. It means a great deal to me. And I just hope, I'm glad your family is well, and everyone watching, your audience. Bless you for supporting adventurous theater and adventurous theater companies. And all of you out there, hope you are safe and well and weathering this as best you can. So
Thanks
thank
so
you.
much.
Yeah. Take care.